us. Richard Johnson joins us, lecturer in US politics at Queen Mary's in London. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Is there a sense that we have people playing politics here, quite literally, while the forest is burning? And it kind of sums up in many ways the problems facing the electorate now in the US.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the politics of this, I mean, it's obviously a terrible tragedy what's going on, but the politics are very interesting. I think you can explain Trump's political response in three ways. That first is through the Electoral College. So Trump has not talked about this very much in the last few weeks. In fact, he hadn't really raised it in about 3 weeks until this past weekend. And that's because the three main affected states are very Democratic states, and they're states that Trump knows he's going to lose, and he could lose by huge margins. He's very likely to lose by very large margins. It won't make a difference. Secondly, Trump has a particular grudge, I think, against California because that state has used its size to launch substantial lawsuits against the federal government for changes that Trump has made to, say, environmental regulations. The state of California has sued the Trump administration 100 times now. And I think the third aspect of this is the politics of climate change. And President Trump has obviously staked his political identity as a climate change skeptic. And so he wants to have nothing to do with any explanations about the wildfires that are rooted in arguments about a changing climate.
Indeed. Biden, let's be clear, blaming climate change. Trump, it seems, blaming everyone else. Do you think this issue is going to be a key one in the remainder of this presidential campaign?
I actually think it's a missed opportunity for Trump. I think if you look back, natural disasters can be the making of presidents. People are often, less likely to blame a president personally for something that's happening in nature, the climate change issue aside. And presidents can show themselves to be very empathetic. Figures can come in, have huge resources from the federal government that they can bring to bear. And Trump has actually brought some of that to bear using the Stafford Act to bring in federal emergency management agency relief to California. But he's not really got stuck into it in the way in which, for example, if we compare President Obama during Hurricane Sandy just before the 2012 election, where he went out and hugged victims and spent time looking at the devastation, really from, as soon as it was safe to do so in New Jersey. Trump has stayed away from this, and I think actually he's potentially missed an opportunity to show himself as a firm responder to a crisis.
Looking a bit broader, Richard, 43%, perhaps more, people didn't vote last time round. Do you feel that either candidate and their teams and their policies is bringing together the kind of thing that's going to make people register, make people get out and vote?
Well, I think it's interesting that the Trump campaign seems to be particularly interested in, or has made a calculation that there is a group of untapped kind of white working class voters who didn't vote last time, who can be persuaded to vote this time. And equally, the Biden campaign, it's not so much about untapped voters as ensuring that there is equitable access to the voting booths, concerns that various state governments, particularly Republican state governments, have moved since the weakening of the Voting Rights Act in 2013 by the Supreme Court to make it more and more difficult for certain communities, particularly non-English speaking communities and African-American heavily resident areas, from voting. So in a way, I think these two campaigns realize there's not a lot to be won by persuading people to come from one side or another. They need to go out and make sure their supporters either get to the polls and can do so safely, or that people who haven't voted before are registered and encouraged to do so. So this is about mobilizing committed constituencies rather than persuading undecided voters.
Richard Johnson, Queen Mary's in London, lecturer in US politics. Thank you, sir, very much indeed for your analysis of the situation there. Hope to speak to you again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the news coming from London.